Okay, we'll start slowly. The actual briefing will start in about a minute. So once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all those of you who joined us today, and of course those of you who joined the course of this briefing. We'd like to extend a warm welcome to all of you to this Galen Growth Annual Review of Digital Health Key Trends webinar. And our focus today is North America, which means a look at Canada, USA, and Mexico. It is based on our comprehensive report, which is available complimentary on our research page. I'd encourage you to go there and review it online or download it for consumption later if you haven't done so already. You'll also find the other 3 regions we have reviewed for the whole of 2021, as we usually do, which are Western Europe, the Middle East, including Israel, and Asia Pacific. This is a complementary program of research that we publish alongside our go-to-reference fee-paying research, which is very much driven by the thematics that keep our clients and other key stakeholders in the ecosystem comfortable with topics such as remote patient monitoring, oncology, mental health. And more recently, for those of you who follow our research, you'll have noted that we also conducted a significant analysis of digital health portfolios as built up by pharmaceutical companies over the past 5 years to understand their strength and their purpose. This analysis, like all our analysis, is very different from a lot of other published analysis. There's certainly no hype, no bias. We're absolutely rigorous about the definition of digital health, and my colleague Sarah, who will be doing this briefing, will touch on our criteria for this analysis. But certainly we're not out to seek controversial or sensational type headlines. We're really around making sure that we get into detail that is important to decision makers, either as investors or those conducting strategy for large corporates. So my name is Julian Salberry, and I'm the founder and the CEO of Galen Growth. For those of you who don't know Galen Growth, it is the world's leading digital health, private market, data analytics, and intelligence company. We work very closely with corporations like insurers or pharmacos, as well as some of the larger investors, as they increasingly focus on digital health. And I think you'll find from today's briefing what I mean by increasingly focus. Our agenda today is a presentation given by Sarah, which will focus on overall key trends, as well as getting into deep dives. And then, of course, we'll open up for Q&A, which is a good segue to saying that the webinar rules are simple for us. It'll be recorded so that those of you who have registered but are unable to join us for an unexpected reason will get access to the recording. But more importantly, the other rule is, if you have a question, please feel free to share it with us. But more importantly, please use the Q&A function to do so, so as to differentiate a question from just chat in the chat room. So a quick topic reminder, this is the Galen Growth annual webinar briefing on digital health key trends in the North America digital health ecosystem, therefore Canada, USA, and Mexico. And I would like to introduce Sarah Schmachtenberg, who is my colleague here in Basel, and I conducted this analysis and will walk you through those key trends for 2021 in that very vibrant ecosystem. Sarah, over to you.
Thank you very much, Julian. It's nice to be here. Thank you all for joining us today. I look forward to sharing this analysis with you. Now, to start, I'm going to tell my computer to go to the next page. Right. To start, as Julian mentioned, we do have an analysis of the digital health ecosystem, but our analysis is very much focused on what we consider to be digital health. And the definition of that, so that we're all on the same page before we start, we look at digital health ventures, meaning anything incorporated after 2002. And that company is a private company. It has not gone public. It has not been acquired. If it was acquired or if it went public during the course of 2021, then we'll be analyzing that, of course, as we go along. The venture has to be qualified as being digital health. In other words, it has to fit into our taxonomy. And that taxonomy is in our report, and we'll touch on it a little bit when we get into our clusters and categories. And anything that's outside of our taxonomy, then if it's not a digital health focus, we don't include it in our research. The geography is determined by the location of its initial country of incorporation. As ventures grow, they tend to incorporate in different countries and move their headquarters. So we look at where they were incorporated. We don't include subsidiaries, and we exclude any government initiatives or agencies, right? Any COVID track and trace solutions that are a subsidiary of the government are not included. Okay, without further ado, let's jump in and look at the ecosystem, because that's much more fun than the rules and the regulations. Agenda. Today we'll look at, first of all, the funding headlines for 2021, then go deeper into the venture ecosystem insights for North America, the investment insights for the cluster focus, therapeutic focus, those deep dives. And the deep dive, we're going to jump into Health Tech Alpha, which is our digital health intelligence platform, and be able to use that to interactively then do the deep dives into our top cluster and top therapeutic focus area for the year. So we're focusing on North America, and in North America, headlines were all over LinkedIn. They were all over the press. 2021 was a record-breaking year. The funding increased by 80%, over 80% over 2020 to reach $34.3 billion only in North America across 824 deals. So a huge increase in digital health funding for the year. And it was really exciting to be able to follow that and understand where are those increases happening and why, more or less. Globally, not only did North America have a excellent year, globally, there was also an explosion of funding in digital health. And that, as you see, the North American, the light gray bar exploded, but as did Asia increased significantly, and Europe had a huge jump in 2021. And we'll be discussing, if you can join us, if you're interested in the European ecosystem, we'll be discussing that in a webinar on Thursday with a focus just on the European ecosystem. And the Middle East as well nearly doubled the digital health funding from 2020 to 2021. So it was an incredible year, a total of 1,658 deals in digital health. Now, putting our focus back on North America, this year Galen Growth was able to include now Canada and Mexico within our North America ecosystem. Overall, the US dominates the funding in digital health with a total of $33.7 billion, next followed by Canada with $619 million. So Canada's still much smaller than the US ecosystem, but has some very mature ventures and is very critical in the digital health scene. Within the US, total funding, California topped the list, followed by New York and Massachusetts. As a proportion of global funding, the North America comprises 34% of the global portion of ventures within the US. So a little more, or basically a third of the ventures in digital health are located in North America, headquartered in North America. And they're growing. The growth rate of those ventures is about 6% for 2021. So as you see, the number of ventures is steadily growing within North America. And we do expect that 6% to increase slightly as ventures become incorporated and then emerge from stealth. We can capture them and very reliably, usually typically a year after their incorporation date. So we expect that 6% to grow somewhat to get closer to the to 8 or 9% as recorded in 2020. Now the venture ecosystem in North America is very mature, and if you look at the funding stages, they tend to get funded quite well and quite early. And in fact, globally, 2021 we saw many ventures getting a stage A funding perhaps earlier than we saw the year before, which is great, which helps the ecosystem grow and mature. There's an abundance of funding at the moment available for those ventures. If you look, the graph that's in front of you is the venture incorporation year. So as the ventures go from being incorporated in 2021 and get older, down to 2012 and below, the state of funding for each ventures, of course, grows. By the time you reach 2017, then you have about 50% of the ventures have reached at least their Series A funding. So that's once the ventures are about 5 years old, then you're pretty sure that about half of them have reached their Series A. And you can see in 2021, even the ventures incorporated last year, almost or just a little bit more than a third of them had already gotten their Series A funding. So as you'll see a topic, funding isn't a problem at the moment for digital health ventures in general. And what's impressive in the US is that ventures that are, let's see, about 7 years old, nearly 10% of them have already had an exit event. So they have had an IPO or been acquired. So that's a very significant figure in looking at a 10% exit rate in digital health ventures within 8 years. Galen growth, our data for digital health ventures goes quite deep, and we then collect a lot of information about different ventures and not only their products, but as well any regulatory approvals they have, partnerships they've closed in the past year. So regulatory approvals in 2021, North American digital health ventures had a total of 234 regulatory approvals, which was then the highest globally. That's 93 ventures actually got regulatory approvals, and we track regulatory approvals not only in the US, not only FDA, but also in Europe and across many of the Asian countries as well. Of those approvals, 29%, 30% were in the medical diagnostics category, or excuse me, cluster. After that, then you have a cluster focusing on wellness and remote monitoring solutions. Jumping to partnerships, and again, looking at the number of partnerships by cluster. And the most popular cluster for developing partnerships was health management solutions in 2021 in North America, followed by patient solutions. So these partnerships were made between the digital health venture and any other organization or corporation or government entity. Could have been pharma, could have been an insurance company, or institutions, hospitals, education, those types of things. So the split of partnerships is quite broad across health management solutions, patient solutions, remote monitoring, and telemedicine. Actually, North America had significantly more partnerships announced than any other of the digital health, the significant regions within digital health. The large funding events in 2021 were a big topic within the news, within the media, and the data behind that shows why. Looking at the historical volume of mega deals in North America, mega deals anything over 100 million, and that the number of mega deals has doubled over the year on year over the past 2 years, with a total of, in 2021, a total of 143 mega deals. And that's just incredible, the number of very large deals going into digital health at the moment. And in fact, 62% of the total funding, the total venture funding in digital health for North America is coming from a mega deal. So that's over half. And that's why it's such a big deal in the media, because it's such a significant amount of funding coming from that type of deal. But as well, what's very notable, and what's indicating a much bigger trend within digital health is looking at the number of exit events. In 2021, there were 95 M&As 14 IPOs and 10 SPACs within North America. And especially looking at the M&A activity, there's a huge indication that digital health, the digital health space, the digital health is very much maturing, because you have a lot of the older ventures then acquiring the younger ventures in order to broaden their portfolio and become very much a mature solution, rather than just a niche area, that they're having then a broad solution available. And we expect that trend to continue throughout 2022, because the ventures are continuing to mature, and we're just really at the start of this trend. If you look, I mean, just within the past week, Lyra Health announced an acquisition of ICAS World in order to really broaden their corporate health offering, and as well Huma, I think last week, also announced an acquisition in order to get in more into remote monitoring. So it's really these large mature digital health ventures that are then acquiring the smaller ventures in order to broaden their portfolio. It's really interesting to watch, and like I said, it's something that we expect to continue over the next year. So it'll be interesting to see how that number of M&As increases throughout 2022. On the flip side of the M&A, you have the IPOs. And what's very interesting, if we track the IPO or track the public digital health ventures over the course of 2021, there's a huge difference in the top 10 venture stocks, so the performance of the top 10, and then as well in the US, looking even at the average in the lower 10. There's no guarantee, of course, there's never a guarantee within stocks, but the top 10 venture stocks increased by 59% over the past 12 months, whereas the bottom 10% lost more than 80% of their value. So there's a big difference in the top performing stocks then, and in the stocks that are not in the top performers, and even the median in the United States, or excuse me, in North America, decreased by 51% over 2021. So quite some impressive figures looking at ventures that have gone public. Okay, so that's the ecosystem in digital health, and understanding where are the ventures and what are their characteristics, their regulatory approvals and partnerships. Now, jumping more into the funding perspective, in 2021, as you see, over all quarters, 2021 broke records and reached the highest funding over the entire course of the year. The United States, we talked about earlier, 34% of the ventures globally are headquartered in North America. And of those ventures that are headquartered in North America, they have 70% of the global venture funding was distributed to North American ventures. So they're getting disproportionately a much larger chunk of the venture funding in that area. Quarter on quarter, you saw before that, obviously the quarterly venture funding deployed was the highest globally. What's interesting to look at are the number of deals, and the blue circles are the number of deals, not only the value, and that number of deals has gone up, but it hasn't jumped in proportionate to the funding value. And so what that means is then the deal size, right? The amount of funding per deal has gone up significantly, and that's what you see in the solid line, ending at 58.1 million being the average deal size for a digital health venture funding deal in North America. And that's, as we talked about before, driven by mega deals, clearly. And again, to split, looking at the split between Canada, the United States, and Mexico in North America, I think it's clear that the United States is the most mature ecosystem within North America. Looking at that maturity in terms of their funding, their series that they're currently raising at the moment. So any ventures that raised funding in 2021 that funding was raised in one of the deal series, and in Canada, the funding value, about 10% of the funding value was raised in a Series D and beyond stage, whereas in the United States, that was closer to about 58. Yeah, about 42%, excuse me, I have to look at just the top percent. About 42% of the funding value was in a Series D and beyond funding raise. So very clearly, the funding, the value in the US is going to the more mature ventures and reaching those Series D and beyond funding stages, where in Canada, the biggest funding was raised, or the biggest value of funding was raised in Series C rounds. Ventures are less mature there, but growing rapidly. In Mexico, there's still fewer funding rounds, and that most of the funding was then deployed in a Series B funding round in Mexico. Excuse me. Okay, so now we Galen Growth splits digital health into different clusters and categories. Our digital health taxonomy I touched on earlier. This is how we define digital health, right? This is what it is. It means to us. The colorful boxes are the clusters, breaking down the different segments. And what you see is below those clusters are categories of digital health. So when we look at funding and we characterize then the ventures, the digital health ventures that are within the space, the top funded digital health clusters in 2021 in North America were clearly patient solutions, followed by health management solutions, remote monitoring, and research, right? With number 2, 3, and 4 being very close together in the amount of funding raised in 2021. Patient solutions was on top. Patient solutions includes disease management, includes digital therapeutics, and on-demand testing. And the largest deal in 2021 for patient solutions was Hinge Health with a $600 million Series E funding round. Now that jumped from rank number 7 in 2020 to the top in 2021. So a huge jump in the area of patient solutions, whereas health management solutions pretty much stayed the same. In 2020, it was landed at number 2, and in 2021, then it also ranks number 2. Of course, the total funding value has increased in 2021. Number 5 space was taken by telemedicine, and then other digital health clusters then captured 40% of that funding. That was looking at funding value as far as the number of ventures, because understanding then the largest cluster in North America is health management solutions, and these are ventures that are focusing on IT solutions, helping whether it be a hospital or a physician manage their digital health solutions in their IT systems, right? And so that's actually the largest cluster in North America with 474 ventures. Second largest is patient solutions. So although patient solutions doesn't have the most ventures in North America, they still captured the largest amount of funding. Telemedicine came in number 5 as far as funding value, but they capture the number 3 spot as far as total number of ventures in North America. Right, and we like to highlight then some of the more mature ventures within those particular top key clusters. And now we also break the digital health space in North America into the different therapeutics focus areas to understand. Last year, mental health jumped from number 2 to the number 1 spot for venture funding. And therefore mental health or ventures that had solutions focusing on mental health then captured the most funding, with 4.2 billion total of venture funding value. On top of that, the largest deal in 2021 was the venture Better Up with their Series E funding round. The second therapeutic focus area was the second highest funded was diabetes, followed by oncology. Oncology was #1 last year, so they fell 2 spots to capture the 3rd spot. Looking at the pie chart, there are, especially since health management solutions is the largest cluster in North America, 54% of the funding actually went to ventures that are disease agnostic, so aren't focused on one particular disease area. But after that 54% of the funding, then of course the top focus area was mental health. Cardiovascular disease and neurology rounded out the top 5, with both receiving a very significant amount of funding for their venture. Right? We can look historically at the development, then showing that the mental health, how it's developed, took the #2 spot in 2020 and the #3 spot in 2019. So mental health, the development of mental health isn't. It was boosted by the pandemic, but it wasn't a product of the pandemic. The focus on mental health definitely started before the emergence of the pandemic. So it's an interesting trend. Now, if you have a report in front of you, you have 4 deep dive areas that you can look into. What I'm going to show you now is jump into Health Tech Alpha, our digital health venture platform, intelligence platform, and look at patient solutions in particular and mental health through the lens of our platform. So give me a sec. Let me jump to Health Tech Alpha. All right. Okay, not yet. New share. Let me share my this one. There it goes. Okay, hopefully you made the jump with me to Health Tech Alpha. And Julian is telling me not yet, not yet. So within the Health Tech platform, there's a lot of information, but I'm going to jump to the workspaces feature, and that if you have access to the platform, you can also create a workspace that's focused really within North America in the deep dive areas. And so I'm going to jump into mental health to start. And Julian, do we have indication from anyone else that
I'll just check
that they have jumped with me into Health Tech Alpha?
Can everyone see the Health Tech Alpha screen Sarah is sharing? Because it's a specific page deep diving into mental health in North America. I can't see it, that's why I'm asking the question. Just checking whether there's a glitches with me or with everybody. Just a quick message via chat function would be helpful.
Not seeing the chart you mentioned.
Okay, hold on then, Greg. Okay. We'll get back to you. Thanks for letting us know.
There we go. We'll do, who can share?
Yeah, it's up. Cool.
Very good.
Done.
All right.
Problem solved.
Then welcome to Health Tech Alpha. Okay, so we've jumped into a workspace that is only focusing on mental health in North America. Right, so all you see here are not only the ventures ranked by their alpha score, which is our proprietary maturity score, but what we're going to look at are the charts that you see that you have in the report are in fact also here within our workspace. Right, for mental health in North America, what we're seeing is we're seeing a 15% 5-year CAGR, right, of venture growth, of new ventures growing into the mental health space. Just fantastic growth rate. 2022, we haven't quite had enough time to discover new ventures yet, but we expect that growth to continue. The therapeutic focus area, the interesting thing about mental health, digital health ventures, especially mental health, is that oftentimes they'll focus not only on digital health, but how that's coupled with another therapeutic focus area. So you see mental health, for example, 4.4% of the ventures in this workspace that have offerings in mental health also have a focus on substance use disorders, right? Also are looking into neurological dysfunctions. So it's a fantastic coupling. And if you have seen our mental health report, there's a web showing the interrelation between those, right? Within North America, the ventures typically have, or the large proportion of them have between 11 and 50 employees. So they've grown beyond just two guys in a garage, two employees in a garage, excuse me. And the top two categories was split between patient solutions, which again are those digital therapeutics and disease management, and telemedicine. Third place, coming not too far behind, are wellness ventures. Okay, in our deep dive, we can see that the majority of the ventures are in the United States, and the funding, the amazing jump of funding for mental health last year in North America, going from 1.7 billion in 2020 to 4.03 billion in 2021. So amazing amount of funding jump. At Galen Growth, we have proprietary analytics that help you understand the space better. Maturity is one of them, looking at the venture maturity with a median of 52 venture maturity. And you can, what we do at Galen Growth is we look at the change in maturity over time, and that median has grown significantly since 2020. So the average maturity of those ventures is indeed maturing, and the solutions are very much getting a foothold in the market. So along with the graphics and the data that you can find, what we can see in mental health is the partnerships that are being developed between digital health ventures and industry. 11% of the ventures are with biotech and pharma companies, and 6.2% are with insurance companies. The largest chunk of the pie being partnerships between institutions or academia and digital health ventures. And that's within mental health. If you're interested in more of the investment space, we can look at the top 10 most active investors within mental health in North America. The top two being Blue Cross Blue Shield Venture Partners and What If Ventures, each with 11 investments in the area. So mental health in North America really exploded in 2020 to take the #1 spot. But that explosion has been not only in new ventures, but really helping ventures mature and bring very mature solutions to the market. Which is fantastic to watch. Now we're also going to jump quickly into, I promised, into patient solutions in another workspace, because that was the top funded digital health cluster in 2021. And in patient solutions, you have 400 ventures in just North America alone. And the ecosystem volume, the number of ventures in North America is growing at a 10% CAGR, not as high as mental health, but still at a very high growth rate. And for patient solutions, the top therapeutic focus areas were mental health, chronic diseases, right? The disease agnostic patient solutions took number three spot, although disease agnostic ventures in general capture the most venture funding in 2021. Let's see. The geography is still focused within the United States, although Canada has 50 startups in the patient solutions sector. And I almost can't fit this funding distribution jump on my screen, because the number of deals jumped significantly in 2021, but the total amount of funding more than doubled. As in mental health, it almost tripled. In patient solutions, it also more than doubled between 2020 and 2021. And 2022 has already started out quite strong. And you see obviously with more venture funding that's coming in, that funding is coming in into the higher rounds, higher stage rounds. And therefore Series A, Series B, and Series C are capturing about 50% of the funding deals within North America. And the venture maturity as well, showing of the entire ventures within North America in patient solutions. Those ventures have all, or more than half of those ventures have gone beyond early stage funding deals and into Series A. So that is my race through a picture of the digital health venture ecosystem in North America and the funding in 2021. It was a fantastic year, and we definitely expect to see continued growth in 2022. And as I mentioned before, we really expect those mergers and acquisition activity to remain at a very high level as the digital health sector matures and the solutions begin building complete solutions rather than just bits and pieces. They're really putting the pieces of the puzzle together, and it'll be interesting to follow that in 2022. I invite you to join me already for the H1 in mid-year, and then we can kind of check in on that and see how that's going. Okay, Julian, are there any questions that we need to answer for our audience today?
Well, I mean, the obvious question that keeps coming up is, great, 21 was another record-breaking year, better than 2020, which is again in its turn a record-breaking year. So what's the Galen growth point of view on 2022 in North America, of course?
There's nothing to slow it down, barring any new pandemic or natural catastrophe. We don't see any reason for the funding to slow down. And as mentioned, that we expect the mergers and acquisition to stay at a very high level.
Yeah, and any specific drivers for example, M&A, exit, increasing in volume?
It's the maturity of the space, right? As the larger and more mature ventures have the power, they have the spending power, and they need to start developing their solutions in order to become a complete package, and that makes them very, very attractive to go out to the patients.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I would advance, of course, the fact that we're starting to see digital health, which is really what I would describe as a cottage industry, highly fragmented, lots of solutions really that mirror each other, and we're going to start seeing, I think, some consolidation of the space going forwards. I think driven either by large corporations starting to move in. I'll come back to that, but importantly, I think driven by the what we call the breakaway, the Galen growth, which is really the larger, more established digital health ventures that are cash rich and are looking to expand to platforms. The other thing, of course, is interest rates are still super low. There is rumors that will go up, and therefore do we therefore see organizations moving forward and therefore trying to make acquisitions whilst they can at prices that they can afford. And of course, the amount of LP funding going into VCs and PE firms is still ridiculous, as of course LPs and other investors seek yield somewhere in the market, and PE is still attracting most of that funding going forwards.
Yeah, we saw a lot of non-traditional investors in 2021 jumping in for the high return rates.
Yeah. Any specific differences between the USA and the other regions, say Europe? I mean, in terms of maturity comparison, any specific big differences in those two regional systems? Other than, of course, funding in one vastly dwarfs the other, but
funding is in a totally different category of its own within North America. North America is way advanced as far as maturity. Maybe that has something to do with the amount of funding that they've gotten. But what you see in North America, or between North America and Europe, there's quite a difference in the focus of categories. So if you check out the European report, you'll see that the categories receiving top funding, as well as the therapeutic focus areas, are different between the two ecosystems. But US and Europe do lead as far as regulatory approvals, so they're both very focused on on health solutions that require approvals. Europe, though, excels then in research and looks a lot more deeper into the research section.
Yeah, certainly the European ecosystem is very rich for innovation, so it'd be good to see the funding follow. So we'll see really on that thing. 21 saw a lot of large corporations, be it pharma, insurance, etc., restructuring, reprioritizing, and not necessarily really full on when it comes to digital health. The beginnings of 22 seem to see a different tone from pharma goes and insurance goes and medical device companies, for example. Obviously too early, we're still in January. Yeah. Any themes that seem to be occupying the minds of executives of these companies that you're seeing or hearing?
No, Julian, you've been talking to a lot of them. Is there anything that you can add to
I know you have too. I guess one of the ones that comes up is, of course, R&D efficiency. That seems to be a hot topic for a lot of pharmacos. How do we leverage digital health more effectively to drive greater efficiencies in R&D pipeline, particularly as we know that for a long time the productivity of the R&D pipeline of pharmacos has been dismal. And so they're really looking at digital health, and of course, as you previously mentioned, there's some fantastic innovation in Europe in the whole research side, not necessarily development, certainly on the research side, drug discovery, decentralized clinical trials. We're seeing, I think, a lot more interest in the application of digital health at home. Home diagnostics is starting to bubble up as a bit of a hot topic.
Yeah, really
beyond remote patient monitoring.
Those medical devices connected, and there's so much rich information that comes from medical devices. Bringing those into the ecosystem is a priority by many medical device companies.
We have a question from anonymous, but never mind. Question is, how are most of these companies making money? License fees from software, value sharing with payers. So in other words, what's the business model? What's the value drivers for some of these more noteworthy ventures that we're studying?
Well, you certainly had at the beginning of digital health, they were trying to sell directly to the patient, to the consumer, and we've seen there have been several instances of where they started with the business model, trying it out directly with the patients. They learned, companies learned from that, and then they have some sort of proof that their solution works. They have data behind them, and then now they're taking those to corporations, doing corporate health. They're taking them to the insurance companies, saying, "Hey, we have proof that our solutions work." So really, then they're seeing a lot more revenue generation when they take their solutions to corporations or to the insurance company level.
Cool. Interesting point made by the question there, which is looked at reimbursement codes. I don't want to get into codes itself because, of course, it's a very US type question in my view. But what can you touch on in relation to reimbursement, or what are some of the trends you're seeing, not necessarily just in North America, but what are we seeing around reimbursement of digital health at the moment in terms of the way in which health systems are starting to wake up to digital health?
Sure, I mean, we have a lot of activity within the insurers, within the payers themselves, as far as developing their own digital health programs, right? Really starting to own that ecosystem and develop their own programs in order to benefit, right, from the digital health ecosystem. Having the preventative solutions and really searching out kind of the risk-based analysis, risk-based prescriptive analytics, you could say, in order for the payers to benefit themselves directly on that. As far as reimbursement, you can now, with digital health, get a lot more data to show, right, that your solution is working. And even the digital health ventures themselves, they'll say, "Hey, we won't take any payment unless you can show we can show you that it's working," right? And so there's a lot of trust, and there's a lot of people jumping in and saying, "Hey, this is working, and we'll bet our company on it," more or less.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we'll touch on the landscape reimbursement, or more specifically the regulatory and reimbursement landscape in Europe on Thursday, when we obviously host a webinar on the European, or more specifically the Western European
Yes.
digital health ecosystem, which has come a long way in the last few years of our studying it, certainly.
Absolutely.
I think we're running out of questions, so it's an opportune time for me to thank you, Sarah, very much for your detailed walk through what is a very comprehensive report, over 60 pages of data and information and insight. So there was no way we could do that justice in the 45 minutes that this webinar was scheduled for. So I heartily recommend that anyone who has further thirst for information goes to our resource page and downloads this complimentary report, along with, of course, the other regions, depending on, of course, their appetite for regions such as Asia Pacific or Europe. Great segue to advertise the fact that on Thursday morning, see our website for further details, but on Thursday morning, we will be hosting a webinar totally focused on Western Europe, more specifically, I guess, a look at the key markets in Western Europe that are driving innovation digital health, for example, France, and of course, looking at the key trends and insights from that ecosystem, and of course, address some of the questions people have. But as we have no further questions, really a big thank you to everyone who joined us today. I appreciate the questions. And we will be continuing in 2022 with our thematic reports. You'll see what we did last year on our website, on our research page more specifically. And I know, Sarah, that you're busily putting together the final touches, I guess, of what our schedule of thematic reports will be for 2022. So we look forward to seeing some of those topics. But I know, for example, that we'll be taking a very close look at some of the key topics we briefly mentioned on this course, such as, for example, decentralized clinical trials, which we know is a very hot topic these days. So thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for your questions, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for joining. We hope to see you in July for our H1 reports. Take care.